Okay, we are live. So, welcome to the Wonderland Effect. Thank you, Claire, for coming on. I'm going to have you go ahead, give a short intro to who you are, what you do. I find it very empowering. Maybe somebody else would as well.
Oh, thank you so much for having me all the way from the other side of the world. So I am Claire, Claire Garner, and I am the creator of the Real and the Raw Leaders movement, founder of the Dare to Share Challenge, and I essentially create legendary stages to showcase other real and raw leaders as we change the paradigm of leadership and the online space to showcase the human behind the perception.
I love that. So, how did you even get started in this? Like, what prompted you to get to here?
Well, that is the story, right? That is how it all happened. I essentially found myself completely lost in the online space earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know who I was, didn't know my thoughts from everyone else's thoughts, and just had this sense of wanting more, wanting to say more, wanting to show more, wanting to share more, but feeling like I couldn't and I shouldn't because everyone makes us believe that as leaders,
Mm-hmm.
we should only share within our content pillars. We should only say things that keep us in alignment with our authority, and we shouldn't air our dirty laundry. And essentially, that led to me having a breakdown pretty much. And I had to really decide to take a step back and to stop doing everything that I was doing and
Mm-hmm.
step away from everything that I thought I was, everything that I thought I should be, and surrender to the unknown. I called it the void and entering a period of uncertainty to find myself again. And through that period of messiness and of really real and rawness and sharing it all with my community, the movement was just born through me as I really shared my darkest, most vulnerable moments. I realized as I started to come out the other side that that was the very thing that was missing from the online space.
I agree. Vulnerability is pretty big, but I think it goes hand in hand with ego. A lot of people don't want to be soft nor vulnerable, especially in social media. We are in a highly social society. Everything is appearance, appearance, appearance. But I love that, you're talking about the vulnerability. You're providing a platform for not only women, but men as well to
Yeah.
come and speak, and maybe they like, I love knowing what I know about you just because of, well, the algorithm gave you to me essentially, let's just say that. um but just like that, I was kind of like, I could have been in a ton of other spheres with a ton of other people, but surprisingly, your post came in at a time where I was looking forward to getting back into speaking publicly. I hadn't been doing it for some years. So I think when I saw your post and kind of went into a little more depth, it's I love things like this. It's more encouraging. Not only that, but you create a safe environment and a safe space. So for you, can you give me like your one of your favorite memories in this journey, because it's continuous, it hasn't stopped.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there are so many. I mean, really, the pivotal moment, which is like seared, ingrained in my memory for all of the rest of my life, is being on holiday in Turkey. And I kid you not, I mean, it sounds so comical saying it, but I was leaning over my balcony because there was zero internet and I was on a Zoom call to my mentor on video. Like, I don't to this day know why we decided to do video when there was no internet. So I'm like leaning over this balcony trying to get reception, half, like the sound half in, half out, not being able to really make out half of what was being said, but literally tears just streaming down my face. And this sense at first, this sense of really failure, right? Of shame and of like, oh, like, how have I got to this point? Like, I've been in business for 10 years. How am I here? Like, how have I not been able to figure this out? And that real sense of like beating myself up. But within maybe 5 minutes later, the end of that phone call, it was like the biggest weight had lifted off my shoulders. And just knowing that there was no more pressure. There was no more pressure. as soon as I made that decision to say, I'm just going to stop everything, it was like the biggest sigh of relief ever. And it just gave me space to really find myself again. And so that moment, although in the moment was not very comfortable or pleasant per se, in hindsight, it was the pivot. It was the moment that everything changed for me. And so if I have to pull one, it has to be that.
That sounds magical. I think everybody should have one of those moments where it's like a bittersweet moment. You're like, I need to find myself. You speak of mentorship. So how did you find your mentor?
A bit like you finding me, the algorithm. Like
It'll
it
do
really
it.
was. There's no fancy story behind that. It was just right place, right time. And I'm all about energy. So the way that I buy is if I see it, I like it, I want it, I get it. Like I'm not one of these people that kind of sits on something for a long time. I'm just like, if it lights me up and it feels in alignment, I just go. And that's what happened with her. I saw her, I liked her, I didn't know anything about her, but I was just like, you're the person for me. And yeah, I stepped into her mastermind experience, which I've been in since January this year. And yeah, it's been incredible. She's really been an amazing partner, really, to have by my side as I've gone on this journey this year.
Yeah, and it can't be. The journeys are never just flatlined. It's always up and down, and you never know what tomorrow might
More like
hold.
a roller coaster, really.
And a lot of people, we showcase so much of this is what the outcome is, but they don't see the behind the scenes, which
Exactly.
makes it a bit difficult for people to understand why you're not completely like you may not be completely happy during that time because they don't understand the amount of stress that goes into pursuing a dream, and empowering people can be very draining, especially when you have people that don't quite believe in themselves yet. So, how do you work around those kind of clients or mentorees that you take on? How do you deal with those people?
I mean, the mentorship that I offer is all around speaking. So that's the only kind of mentorship that I work with people, but it's all about tapping into desire. So the question that I get asked a lot is how do you know when you're sharing too much?
Hmm.
Right? Like where is that line of okay, now we're just mind splurging. And my answer is always there is no solid answer to that because everyone is individual
Yes.
and it's not about where is it too much? It's about where is your desire. So if you desire to share something and you know that it's going to be helpful to someone, and I don't mean that in a teaching way or an educational way or this is how to XYZ way. I mean it in a okay, I had a really shit day today. My kids drove me mad. My car broke down. My hair's a mess. I've got no makeup on, and now I'm on a podcast call. Like that, if you desire to share that, you don't have to have the answer. You don't have to have it all figured out. But if you desire to share that, you know that someone out there is going to watch that and they're going to see you show up tomorrow and they're going to see you show up the next day and they're going to tie the two together and they're going to say, wow, look at how she just led herself through that. She has all this normal everyday life going on, as do I. And yet here she is a few days later, smashing it out the park again, showing up again, not giving up again. And so that's how we impact people. We don't always have to lead someone somewhere. We just have to show how we lead ourselves. And
Hmm.
so kind of a roundabout answer to your question there because my mentorship is very different to anything out there. It's about how do you share your story in a real and a raw way? How do you tap into that level of vulnerability without being seen as a victim? How do you lead yourself without feeling that you have to have like this dominance and this dictatorship that the industry tells you is what
Hmm.
leadership really is? Because that's the paradigm that we're changing.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you because Me personally, I do love public speaking, but a lot of people don't understand the transition from public speaking to podcasting is completely different. Active listening and speaking to people are two different forms of communication, which I often tell people like, you want to learn how much you know about people or how patient you are, start a podcast or start something where
Yes.
you have to actively listen because actively listening is so much more than just you being there and not having a response like we're having a conversation now. If I wasn't listening to you, this is the hardest thing for any public speaker that comes on to a podcasting platform, which I'm sure you could agree, is the transition in communications. So you go from speaking to people, you know, inspiring people. You might have minor conversations at the end, but the active listening is so much more energetically consuming. Like you can't just sit there and let the person talk and then completely direct the conversation to a different way. It's not entertaining and it's also not educational in a way. So, what I want to know next is what has been your most difficult part in forming the real and raw business platform that you have, is what I will call it.
Do you know, that's an interesting question because as you asked me that, I can't really think of anything because I swear to God, everything just has fallen into place. From the very first Dare to Share challenge idea that I had, that was where it all began with, okay, I'm going to do this challenge on Instagram. As soon as I had that idea, within 48 hours, I had every slot sold out. Like it was gone. And as soon as I decided to take that up a level, every slot was gone. And as soon as I decided to change that into a summit, the speaker slots were gone. It's like when you're in alignment, I truly believe this, and I've been in business a long time, but when you're in alignment and you are so fueled by desire and by passion and by change that you
Mhm.
want to bring into the world, the universe co-conspires in your favor. Like
I
I
agree.
truly believe that. And so I don't really have an answer because it hasn't felt hard. It really hasn't. It's just the hardest thing probably has been staying out of my own way. So
I
not getting back in
agree.
my head, like
That's
not
what
getting
I
back in
that's what I would say.
not trying to control it and just
Let it be. Let it come.
continuing to surrender.
And that's probably what I would say in my journey has been the hardest is it's not necessarily the podcast or the branding. It's not overthinking and letting the
Yeah,
content be the content and like understanding that people showing up is for me. They're showing up to see me. So it's really about making sure you're staying connected to yourself because
yeah,
once you stop connecting to yourself, the content becomes different, the criteria becomes different, and you fall out of love with it. And I don't want to fall
absolutely.
out of love with me. That's what that's what I tell most people is like a lot of the passions that people pursue in this world is love for yourself. It's very self-love. A lot of people who follow their passions will say that it's not about whether I like it necessarily. I love it. I love it enough to struggle a little bit and then keep going with it.
Yeah.
What I would like to say, what was my next question? I had a bunch of questions for you actually. Um, what? So how did you get the idea to start your podcast?
You know, again, again, it was just a moment, right? It was just a desire that I had in the moment. And like you said earlier, actually, with the public speaking, you know, it's very one way. It's very, you know, you're doing all the talking and the reciprocation is mostly in DMs or it's mostly, you know, like a little voice note here and there. It's not deep conversations. And I love deep conversations and I love connection and I love humans and I just love having relationships with people. Even when I started my very first business 10 years ago, the reason that it grew so well is because I built relationships with people. I would literally say yes to anyone for a coffee, and I don't even drink coffee. It was just like I would meet anyone to get to know them and to see where that relationship would take me, and that stayed with me, you know, most of my adult life. And so the podcast, it was just a moment. In fact, I can tell you the moment. I randomly turned on the telly on Netflix and I started watching this program called No One Wants This, I think it's called that. And within a few minutes, the lead role, she's a podcast host. And I turned it on and I knew in my mind that I wanted to start a podcast again. It was my second one. I just was waiting for the moment.
Hmm.
I didn't want to force it. I was just like, I'll know when it's time to go, right? And so I turned it on, see her like sat on her sofa, podcasting with her sister, and I'm like, that's the sign. I'm ready, baby. And I recorded my first episode the next day.
I
That
love
was
it.
it.
And how old is your podcast now? You just started this, right?
Oh, yeah, I think it's maybe like a month, if that.
Oh, wow. And you've had so much
Yeah.
traction, so it's like I think when people think about podcasts, they think the typical, like the popular podcast. But as a smaller podcast, it's a little more personal. Like it should be. It should be very personal to you. So how did you? I mean, besides your platform that you have, I mean, that's kind of like what would be hand in hand. But I find that your podcast is more like a like what do you call it? I think you said it was like '90s girl talk or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're having these conversations, I'm assuming it's more conversational style versus interview style because that's another thing people need to understand the different styles. But I do personally love conversation style versus like we're just here for an interview. This is one on one. Here are my 18 questions. Answer the questions. Um, so how did you find your style for podcasting?
It's very different. So if you ever listen to my first podcast, which is called Phoenix Rise, which I started, I don't know, maybe 18 months ago, 2 years ago, something like that. And that went through its seasons as well, right? Because we're all growing as leaders and as speakers. We all have our own evolution and journeys as well. And that was very much interview style. That was get high caliber, high level guests on,
Yeah.
7, 8 figure industry leaders, interview them, that was kind of the format of it. And whilst I do enjoy interviewing, and that's what I do on my Dare to Share challenge, I do like being an interviewer and I like that style. This just wasn't what I wanted the podcast to be. I just wanted the podcast to be very informal, very relaxed, because I really wanted it to be like the heart and the soul of the Real and Raw Leaders movement, which is the human. And
Hmm.
so if we just take away everything else and we connect with the human, everything else just comes after that. And so that's what I wanted it to be. And I knew that that wouldn't be, you're not going to get that from an interview. I just wanted to hang out. I just
Yep.
wanted to have fun, to take off the masks and be like, hey, like, what's going on in your life at the moment? Like, let's just chat and see where it goes, because those conversations literally go anywhere and everywhere. And it's just fun. It's just
So much more
exciting.
enjoyable. It's way more enjoyable to do that. Okay, so let's get a little bit deep off of what you just said. So do you think that this influx of attention to podcasts, especially conversation style, is due to a lack of love in real life? Love and connection and
Yeah, I do. And I think that not even just in real life, but like online as well, because I think that the collective, the world is changing. It's shifting. It's it's ready for a new. And I actually did a post about this today because one of my friends posted something on her Facebook, and it was about her passion for the new paradigm, if you like to call it that, okay? Like the new way of leadership,
Mhm.
sharing vulnerability, sharing realness, rawness, authenticity, all of that. And she had a very high level industry leader comment on that, being like, as leaders, we should be very careful about what we say, and really like notching her down a peg. And she voice noted me and she's like, oh my God, like, this has just fueled me even more. Not in an aggressive way, but in a way of like, this is the problem, because
Mhm.
we have these people at the top of the pyramid saying, this is how we've always done it. So this is the way it always needs to be. And yet there's a new wave. It's almost like generations, right? There's a new wave of leaders coming in and saying, but we don't want to do it like that anymore. We want connection. We want relatability. The post I made today was all about relatability and how so many of these top leaders say that to have authority, you cannot be relatable because you friend zone. And so my example was Mel Robbins.
I love
Obviously, how does she introduce her podcast? Hi, it's your
it's Mel.
friend Mel.
Yes, every podcast, every episode she does.
And would you ever consider not working with Mel Robbins because she's
Oh no,
called
I
you her
love
friend?
Mel. Mel Robbins is
Exactly.
I
It's
love
like,
her. She's one of my favorite podcasters in the sphere. But
yeah.
I think what a lot of people fail to recollect is that when you think of leaders, you often think of masculinity. And to be honest, a lot of this red pill, blue pill has poisoned and infiltrated the whole society. So when you talk about leaders being vulnerable, they see that as weakness. Or when you talk about people being real and raw, that's weakness because in business, we'll take that because you know a lot about business as well, especially in a corporation, it's very cutthroat and very emotionless. So for him to comment that, I understand that as well, but I also see, because I still have a corporate job, I also see the transition. People are starting to gear towards the servitude leadership is what the style is called. And how do you think this will impact corporations as we transition more into a servitude style? What do you think
Mm,
the
I
impact
think
will be?
I think it is shifting, as you say, and I see it. I have a corporate business as well, and I see it changing, even from the dynamics of client relationships and the way that those interactions take place, and even to the level of what those interactions are. Right? It's not just all about business now. It's not just about, okay, this is what I'm ringing you for because this is how we serve you.
Yeah.
It's like, the human. You're actually building that relationship. And my corporate business, I mean, the retention rate is, I don't even know what it is, super, super high because we focus on those relationships. And I think that the way that the world is shifting, that is just going to get more and more. And I think it will take time. I do think
Yeah.
it will take time, especially in corporate. Um, Corporate America, obviously, I'm assuming, is not really much different to corporate England.
Sounds about correct from what you're saying. Very fairly parallel to what you got going on out there. But just being a manager in my position, I went from a very horrible culture where it was fear based. It's fear based culture. And our retention rate was really low. It was really cutthroat. Like if you had a family emergency, you did not have the job next day. Like it was
Yeah.
very cutthroat. But to see it transition into what is transitioning into now, I can find myself. I'm a female, so by nature we like to build connections. So, and I'm one of the only females in the factory. So a lot of people, when I first got promoted into my position, the question was, can I handle the difficult things, the difficult conversations? Now, fast forward 4 years later, I've went from like being top notch to just being okay with the team that I have because sometimes greed does not serve you well. That's the one thing I can say, especially in corporate. So I do like that it is transitioning, and it's good to hear that it's not just here; it's there as well.
Yeah.
Um, what I do see a lot of people do when they go into a leadership position is go into what's a nice way, power trip, in a bit of a power trip. So that I think when you're developing a business culture, you have to bring a little bit of your own personality into it, which is something that younger leaders don't necessarily know, or the older leaders even, because they'll be stuck in their ways. So those are pretty much the harder people. So the purpose of that was just because your reference to your friend saying what she would like to see in the future. I do see a lot of backlash coming for a lot of women, a lot of anybody that's advocating for more of a connection in any capacity when it comes to leadership. And I do
Any
kind of,
change,
yeah,
you
any
know,
change,
any
any change.
comes with resistance because we don't like change as humans, and that's to be expected. And I think, if you're one of these people that is a pioneer, a trailblazer, a revolutionary, someone who wants to ignite change, you have to be okay with that, and you have to have a desire that's stronger than the fear of that potential rejection and projections as well.
So when you were in a I wouldn't say horrible mental state, but in a less pleasant place, do you think it was because of the corporate job that the way that the corporate ran, or was it just solely?
No, No, because I mean, my corporate business, I have a team who run it. I don't really get involved in that. I haven't done for many years. It was the online space.
Ah,
So I was doing personal branding and content coaching earlier this year, and I was obviously in the online space, Instagram predominantly, and I'd never been in it in that way before. You know, I'd only
yes,
ever
I
been
do.
in it as a person, like as an individual. And coming into it from a business angle, you know, you then obviously the algorithm and stuff, you get all of these other coaches and you find yourself in all of these worlds that you never knew existed before. And the noise was huge.
Yeah,
But it was the noise around, you know, I've just had 10K month, I've just had 20K month, I've just had 100K month, I've just had a 500K month. And you're sat there like, okay, that's great, but how? Like how? And what else have you like been navigating? And you know, what does that look like? And how have you got here? And it was just like the way that I phrase it now is all of these success stories without any context.
yep,
It's like you're showing the success, which is great. I'm never saying that we don't want to see that. Of course, we want to see that, but we want the full picture. We
yeah.
want the
Show me the ugly.
360 degrees of what that actually means. Because, like you said earlier, you might have all this success and be miserable as fuck behind the scenes. And so, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't
So,
bring
we
you
want
happy.
to exactly, we want to see it all because that is how we really empower others to move.
Yeah, being transparent, which is really Instagram, any platform, because I just had my moment with TikTok. I post a lot of like older clips when I'm in filming or when
Okay.
I'm waiting for content, just to keep me relative. And for those watching, if you are a new podcaster, that is the best way to keep yourself relevant while you're waiting for content, is to post old clips from old episodes. So in these older episodes, I was a lot heavier, a lot more inflamed because I didn't take my health that serious. So a lot of the comments were really, really mean. I had to turn off the comments, and it was the first time I've ever had such a negative reaction. So I didn't know how to deal with that necessarily, but I also have to remember at that time I was in a completely different place, and these are old episodes. So for your own sanity, I mean, I don't know if you do this, so I'm going to ask this. If you do this at all, you might step out or step away from the public eye a little bit just to regroup. Do you find yourself doing that?
Uh, I do not consume anything anymore.
Oh,
So I literally I will post obviously because that's where my people are, and then I remove. I come off. I do not consume. Some people might say that that's not supportive, but my communities are in other spaces when they come into my world. So I support my people, like in our Telegram chat. I support my people in one-to-one containers, and I don't need to be liking on their Instagram posts for them to know that I support them.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't consume anymore because that's what a big part of the problem was for me mentally.
Yeah. That's what I was dealing with that for a while. I turned the comments off, like, because I just didn't want to see them. Like, I've already made a lot of progress, so for me to dwell on it, because that's what I would do, fixate on it.
Yeah,
And a lot of people don't realize, like, we are putting our faces very publicly everywhere. So
yeah.
we are highly criticized, and if you don't have the mental state of steel, then I highly suggest you either learn how to do it, or I didn't even think about doing what you just said to do, which I've been gearing towards getting a membership ready. So if they want like one-on-one with me, or if they want a little more of an exclusive YouTube background or look, I want to make it so it's like for specific people that are really serious. Like if you want to pay me to get on there and harass me, then that's your own prerogative. I think you have a little more to worry about than just little old me.
Yes.
But I do want to wrap this up because I do want to be respectful of both you and I's time. I do appreciate you for coming on. I do have one last request, not really a question. If there's one piece of advice that you could give to anyone hoping to find, that light, what would you say to them?
Stop listening to everyone else, start listening to yourself, and then start sharing that. Start sharing that with true depth, true vulnerability, and don't be afraid to show you're human, because that is what your people are waiting to see, and that is what is going to connect with them in a deeper way than ever before.
Thank you. Okay, you guys. So, for those of you watching, I will link all of her information below. I already have a summary. Y'all know this is new for me. I will go ahead and update that as I have time. As always, thank you guys for joining us. And thank you, Claire, for joining us as well. Um,
You're most
and also, thank you for having me on your platform. I love it. I'm so excited. So, stay
super
tuned
excited.
for all of those. I will be broadcasting her platform and all of the future endeavors that we may or may not have. Who knows? Bye.
Bye.